Let's start off with rather an easy one. What do you mean when you say energy security?
Good question. In general, in the context of Africa, when you look at energy security, we deal with a different energy sector structure because a large share of the population relies on biomass. And then you have electricity and you also have oil and gas. In the international context, when you talk about energy security, usually we deal with oil and gas supplies mainly, and incrementally we go into electricity. But in the African context, we have broadened that concept to include also the biomass side. But basically, by energy security, we mean two main components. One is the cost side, cost of energy. Every time in the long term, if the cost of energy is increasing, the system is driven towards less security. The second one is obviously availability of energy at all times, oil and gas supplies, electricity, biomass. We have to put in place a system that will guarantee there is a continual supply of energy at affordable prices. So those two have to be monitored very carefully.
At this particular moment, if we're looking at an outlook in the east of the continent, or even say on an African perspective, what is the energy security state?
If I look at in depth what this particular policy framework has identified, which is also common in the context of Africa. If you look at the three segments, again, biomass, electricity, and oil and gas, we have quite serious and deepening energy security problem on the biomass side. For example, the imbalance between demand and supply. In the case of Rwanda is about 29%. If you go to Kenya and Uganda in the 69-70% deficit, which means there is demand, but we cannot supply it. That is leading to rising cost of biomass. If you look at it in the electricity sector, again, the continent faces a large-scale shortage of electricity supply. In the face of the continent's transformation and development agenda, that we consider it a major constraint. That will lead to rising prices, but also unstable supply to support industry. For oil and gas, similarly, we don't yet have sufficient infrastructure, instruments, and tools to make sure there is a continual supply of oil and gas for our socioeconomic functioning. So overall, what we observe is there is a serious energy security challenge, and through this kind of instrument, we are encouraging countries to consolidate the activities they are working right now and put them in the context of a national strategy to manage the energy security problem that we're facing.
Launched 2 days ago, of course, was the EAC Energy Security Policy Framework. I have to look at it every time because I can't remember every word. But tell me, what's the purpose? What does it bring to play?
The purpose is manifold. One, we are not very sure in terms of how we're going to measure and provide an accurate picture of what energy security looks like in a country.
All right.
So we developed, with the participation of experts at each of the partner state level, what would be an accurate measurement methodology in terms of providing that picture. So that has been included. The second thing is, how do we monitor and evaluate progress over time? What kind of instruments and tools we have? So we have developed that for the biomass, electricity, and oil and gas sectors. For oil and gas sectors, relatively easier because globally it's a much more developed concept, methodology, and approach. But for biomass and electricity, we devised an appropriate methodology for, in the context of Africa, how we measure it and evaluate it. The third component it's suggesting is it has to be institutionalized in the way of how we report, how we manage it, and how we respond to emergencies if they arise. So all of that has been included as part of a regional framework, and we are hoping that countries will contextualize these methodologies and recommendations and then devise their country strategy in managing at the country level this kind of challenges.
I've been seeing from the IMF, of course, looking at the fast economic growth in East Africa that is expected to actually boost the need for oil and gas, or pushing demand for oil and gas in the region. We already see countries, most of them between 90 and 80% with the use or reliability, relying on biomass. Tell me, with oil and gas, electricity, and biomass, which of these three that, of course, the framework deals with is in maybe a deeper security crisis at this moment?
We are recognizing that all those three areas have energy security challenges identified. And of course, you would have to manage the entire energy system that includes those three components to have a much more resilient, a much more secure energy system that supports the economy side, the social side, and so on and so forth. But of the three, to come to your question, the biomass is having a deepening crisis for many reasons. One, the biomass sector, the market is not organized. Two, we noticed that supplies are dwindling. For example, if you look at just deforestation, what's happening on the stock side, over the course of 13, 14 years, we have seen stock draw down by up to 40% in the case of Burundi and Uganda. We have seen similar deforestation rates in the case of Tanzania. There is no, the energy sector is not currently regulating how biomass energy is utilized. The market is not well organized. Therefore, we have supply side issues and at the same time pricing and affordability issues. So we have recommended for energy sector regulators to take on board an energy source where more than 85% of the population is relying, where currently the energy sector is not regulating. At the same time, we rely 100% completely in this region on imported oil and gas resources in many of the countries. Now, that leads to the question of how stable are the supplies and how exposed are we to global prices on oil and gas importation. We noticed every time the price in the international market is increasing for oil, for example, we devote up to 10% of our GDP to deal with that, or up to 40% of our import bill is basically dealing with import of those kind of fuels. So we can institute a series of measures such as strategic reserves, such as regional cooperation around that, such as addressing domestic production capacity, efficiency issues, and so on and so forth to deal with those kind of problems.
Yohannes.